Oh, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff to get in the first take today. Kevin Durant issued an apology. I think it was an apology, Max. I think it was. Also, Draymond Green has some things to say. And, of course, Carson Wentz, Lamar Jackson. What do they have in common? We'll figure it out. First take's in the house. Let's go. Where's my DJ?
Put that camera on me.
Can't believe what I just heard.
Are you good or bad at what you're doing? You're terrible. You're the worst.
Something is wrong with you.
This is the definition of player hating.
The best show on television.
Stop right there. He's the best.
Definitely co-sign that sentiment.
Thanks for tuning in to First Take.
Start the damn show.
Good day. Welcome into First Take on this Feel Good Friday. Also Good Friday.
Molly, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Stephen A, Max?
We can't hear Molly.
Oh, no. Well, I was just telling you guys how handsome you look, how excited I am to be here with you. I'm going to roll with what's happening in the show, and hopefully producers can fill you in. Welcome to 2021, America. So here's the deal. I want to start with the Kevin Durant situation. So yesterday, Katie addressed the messages leaked by actor Michael Rapaport, which Stephen A. just mentioned that have been made public this week. Rapaport posted private messages that he said Durant had sent to him, which included threatening language, anti-gay, and misogynistic slurs. Coach Steve Nash said the organization had a convo with Durant and the language used in the exchange about that. Here's KD addressing the entire situation.
I'm sorry that people seen the language I use. That's not really what I want people to see and hear from me. But hopefully I can move past it and get back out on the floor.
Stephen A., how should the NBA handle the situation with Kevin Durant?
Well, listen, I definitely think that a fine has to come his way. I got to confess that, I'm worried because let me reiterate what I said a couple of days ago, yesterday, actually. Michael Rapaport had no business exposing private messages from Kevin Durant. You violated all kind of man rules. It's important to say that. Having said all of that, I hearken back to Donald Sterling being exiled from the NBA. I was just thinking about him going off on Michael Rapaport, and that's the way I think it should go. We should see this as him going at Michael Rapaport, going off personally about Michael Rapaport, and it was an argument between two dudes, period. The problem is that Donald Sterling engaged in a private conversation with his mistress at the time. She secretly taped those calls. As a result, the commissioner felt banishment was appropriate because of pressure from the players, and that was that. And I recall that back at that time where Mark Cuban was saying, this is dangerous, this opens a Pandora's box. What are we going to do if this happens to one of the players? What are we going to do if this happens to another owner or coach or whatever the case may be? And Adam Silver's response is, no matter how private we want to surmise that is, it's become public. And so the only reason I bring that up is because the other day when we were talking, Max, about Michael Rapaport and Kevin Durant going at it. Molly brought up how there were anti-gay sentiments expressed in Kevin Durant's diatribe. So because of that, if the gay community raises up, because the NBA is investigating it, the NBA security, they're going to hand their information over to Byron Spruill, who runs operations for the NBA. He's going to commiserate with Commissioner Adam Silver, and there's going to call that's going to be made. Now, me personally, I think that because of it, it's a fine similar to the fine that Kobe received when he spewed the F word in the direction of a referee one day, and and obviously it was an anti-gay sentiment, and Kobe was fine. I think that's all that should happen to Kevin Durant here. I'm fearful that people will try to make more of it than that personal animus he had with Michael Rapaport at that particular moment in time. We don't know what Adam Silver is going to do. And remember, the times that we were living in then, when Kobe made that mistake, these are different times now. And the pressure that potentially could be brought to bear on the league to do something about specifically what Kevin Durant said has me concerned. I don't believe it warrants that. I believe that it should have never been publicized. Michael Rapaport was wrong for doing that. But I also think that Kevin Durant was immature and foolish for saying what he said. And you know, he last night he apologized for it being public. He doesn't want people to know that he talks like that or whatever. So it was like a non-apology apology. I'm worried because I don't know what the NBA is going to do because of the times that we're living in. But me, myself, you arguing with Michael Rapaport, you wanted to insult him. It's between him and you. And because the stuff got out, and that wasn't Kevin Durant's fault at all, the bottom line is I think it should be nothing more than a fine.
There should definitely be a fine. There, at least there needs to be a punishment.
Yeah.
Two things I noticed about KD's response. Then I want to address some of the stuff
Sure.
you said. Number one is, as you mentioned, he didn't apologize for using the language. He apologized for others hearing what he said in private publicly.
Right.
Right. The other thing is, and the reason he really needs to be punished is there was a threat in the direct message. Mm-hmm. There was a threat. If you say you're going to show up and spit on somebody, I can't wait to see you in person, etc., that's a threat. Mm-hmm. Once you get to a threat, that's an automatic punishment. And you put it in writing, too. Now, KD may have thought, look, we're handling this between two people.
Yeah. That's exactly what he thought.
Right. And I understand why he would think that. You put it in writing. If you threaten someone in writing and they choose to make that public, that's your problem. Shouldn't have put it in writing, I guess. When you say the gay community, if the gay community takes offense, then to me the problem with that is the gay community is not a monolith.
Correct.
You know, saying black people, Jewish people, white people, Asian people, gay people, whatever group you want to mention, they're not a monolith. There are individuals within that group who think very differently, even opposite each other, right? And so to me, it's really about just being socially conscious and doing the right thing. That means all of us. So the language he used, which is now public, that needs to be punished, and the threat needs to be punished. And furthermore, the issue I have is that KD, as you touched on both before the show started on air and just now, he doesn't seem, I don't think he doesn't understand. I think he's not sorry, it sounds to me, for the actual language used or for the threat. He's sorry that, what he's saying is, I would never say that publicly. And I respect that because we all behave differently behind closed doors. Those are called backroom issues versus front room issues, right? Sociologically speaking. We use different language, we have different behavior in our private lives, and that's no one's business as long as we're not hurting anybody. If that becomes public, now you have some explaining to do. And all he is talking about is that he's sorry it became public. He wouldn't do that in public. But now, because it's public, people have a right to know, well, hold on, KD, you think that's okay in private? Because the reason it's an issue is what we're really saying is that's not okay in private.
In fairness to Kevin Durant, I think it's important to point this out. I don't think that he's saying what he said is okay to say in private. I think his mentality is, I'm not talking about, I didn't mean any harm whatsoever to the gay community or anything. I'm talking about that dude, Michael Rapaport. That's who I was directing my comments at, specifically to him. Yes, I'm not talking about anybody else. And I think that's why he was unapologetic. I surmise, I haven't spoken to him. I surmise that's why he was unapologetic, because his ire was directed at one specific individual, whereas with Donald Sterling was like, hey, why you got to hang around with black people? I mean, what do you get out of it? I mean, why is it important for you to be around black people? Okay, and so that you're generalizing and you're castigating an entire community, and you're really showing us that plantation mentality that we assumed you had to begin with, and it just got confirmed via a secret taped conversation with your mistress. In the case of Kevin Durant's mentality is, I was cussing out this dude.
But here's the problem with that.
And I'm not saying, no. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm saying to get to your point about what Kevin Durant was non-apologetic about. I think what he was non-apologetic about is the fact that I'm aiming it towards him. I don't have a problem with anybody but him.
But here's the issue, and this is what I mean by just if you're socially conscious. You don't have to be gay or black or Asian or whatever to say, wait a minute, that's not okay with me, even though I'm not a member of that group. We simply empathize.
Right.
And if you empathize with people in a group, then you say, wait a minute. Well, from that point of view, even if you're directing it at an individual, what you're saying is there's something wrong with being that, right? If you're using anti-gay language to go at somebody, implicit in that is there's something wrong with being gay. So what KD really should say is something along the lines of, I apologize.
He should have said that last
gay people because I'm not saying there's anything wrong.
He should have said that last
I used it in a way that intimated that there was something wrong with that, and there's not, even if it's used frequently as an insult.
But do we know that he did it because all we saw was the soundbite they played on TV? See, what I'm saying is I don't know if Kevin Durant elaborated and
add to the Miami Heat. Clearly, it's been a tough run for the Warriors without Klay Thompson. He was asked about the Warriors' playoff hopes despite their recent struggles. Here's Dre.
To be honest with you, I don't go into these games thinking like, man, we need to win these games to get the playoffs. Like, I hate losing. So when I step on the floor, I want to win. But I'll be 100% honest with you. Fighting for a play-in spot does not motivate me. We're in, 10th? Fighting for a playoff spot doesn't motivate me at all.
Of course, multiple-time champion. Max, what do you think Dre's really saying here?
He's saying that if there's no championship on the line, it's hard for him to get motivated. He's saying that he knows that this team has no shot at the chip this year. This is not like baseball or football where just get in the dance, right? Long as you make it to the playoffs, who knows? It's kind of random. That's one of the things that makes baseball and football postseasons exciting. The best team doesn't always win. Basketball's different. The reason basketball has always been more barbershop talk than football or baseball, more like boxing, Stephen A., is because in the end, it's more determinative. It's not as probabilistic. If you have the best players, maybe your team and one or two other teams are most likely to win. What's crazy about this season is how many teams seem to have a lot of the best players. So we're like, Nets, Lakers, if they're healthy, but there's a lot of real challengers. What Draymond's saying is we're not one of those teams, not without Klay Thompson. And he's right. This Warriors team minus Klay Thompson is not a championship contender. So it's hard for a dude like Draymond Green to get excited. There are some teams in the NBA like the Lakers. Kobe used to say, if we don't win a championship, that's not a good season for us. They want to win the championship every year. Draymond's coming off a dynasty where they were the favorites or among them to win the championship every year for half a decade. They won several, and he was on maybe the greatest team ever, one of them, and he's saying, like, this ain't that. Talk to me next year.
Draymond Green is saying, we play 82 games normally, this year 72 regular season games. If you can't definitively be a playoff team over 72 games, what the hell are we playing for? We don't belong in the postseason. As you would say, we ain't ready. They're 23-25, okay? Having said all of that, I want to completely and totally applaud what he said in terms of his attitude. This is a 3-time champion, a man who's went to 5 straight NBA finals. Now, I know he's only averaging 6 points and 6 rebounds right now, shooting 26% from the field. And in the interest of fairness, just like I mentioned about Russell Westbrook, Draymond Green's another dude that needs to improve his 3-point shot, all right, which he knows because I've told him that constantly, okay, because I love the brother. I know he's a basketball savant. I know what he can do on the defensive end of the floor. I know he's a great point forward, et cetera, et cetera. But he's another dude that needs to improve his 3-point shot. The difference between him and others is he's got 3 chips, okay, and 5 trips to the NBA Finals. So it's a little bit different for him because that ain't his role. I'm just saying that the Golden State Warriors would be significantly more lethal even now if Draymond Green was a threat from the perimeter, specifically the 3-point range, because he gets open shots. And if he would have buried them instead of hitting 26.8% of it, I think Golden State would have a better record than 23-25. But I think it's important to point out what he's saying because, again, not to sit up there and belabor the point that I was making about Russell Westbrook the other day, but it's worth reiterating. Russell Westbrook is a future Hall of Famer, the greatest athletic point guard we have ever seen in the history of basketball. And he has the numbers to support that he's going to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame when his career is over, okay? But when you're going up against Steph and you're going up against Dame in the Western Conference, as you were before this season throughout your career, there's a reason that them brothers are what they are right now, because the game and how it has evolved. If you are a point guard that has sniper-like tendencies, it can elevate you to elite status, the likes of which we're seeing from them now. Damian Lillard is a top 2 MVP. And let me tell you something. If James Harden takes too many days off, which he won't do, or if he scales back because Kevin Durant returns and Kyrie returns all the time, Damian Lillard's going to win league MVP because he's been sensational. We're talking Russell Westbrook, another triple-double last night, but they lost by 29. And all I'm saying is that when Draymond Green says stuff like that, when we see champions or those who aspire to be champions, that's the kind of language we want to hear. We don't want to hear championships. You know what? I'm a champion in life. We know he's a champion in life. We're talking purely about the game of basketball. In the game of basketball, that is not the case, even though your talents demand you should be, because Russell Westbrook is so great, he should be a champion.
What you're saying about Draymond is 100% true about hitting threes. It's not coincidental that before KD ever got there, the year they won 73 games, Draymond was hitting 39% from three. Right, and he hasn't been anywhere near
What about
that.
what he did in Game 7 that they lost?
He would have been Series MVP. He would have been fine. Had it not been for LeBron,
That's right.
Draymond was going to be Finals MVP.
Absolutely.
He was great that year. But all year he's hitting 39% from three. That's not coincidental that was the year they won 73 games. So what you're saying, of course, is true. Even about Westbrook, if Westbrook shot 40% from three, he'd be in the conversation for the greatest player of the era instead of just in the top 10 greatest players of his era, right?
Absolutely.
So, of course, that's true. What I peel from Draymond, from what he's saying is simply, I'm a championship player, and more importantly, this is a championship franchise and team. We don't get excited if we don't think it can win a championship. They're waiting for Clay's
And that's
return.
what you want to hear. That's what you want to hear.
Yeah. No question. By the way, guys, I find this interesting. I know we were talking about the Nets earlier, but you did mention championship. The Nets are now the favorites, according to Caesars, to win the title. So that switched. But interesting, even with the injuries and stuff that they're dealing with, Brooklyn, the favorite, according to Vegas. We'll leave it there. When we come back, some NFL to get into. Max, you're going to find this one interesting. Find out which receiver chose Carson Wentz, your boy, over Lamar Jackson. What does Max have to say about that coming up? And legendary coach Roy Williams calling it a career. We'll ask Seth Greenberg who should be the next coach of the Tar Heels. I know Stephen A. has a recommendation. To more in staying with Carson in Indy?
Yes, I think he will regret that. I agree, by the way, with the assessment of Carson Wentz. He's a special talent, always has been. That's why I thought he was going to win MVP on his way to doing it in 2017. That's why it took me a while to see, no, this is regression. This is no good. This is no good. Took everyone else longer to see it for some reason, except for maybe the Eagles front office. But he kept going in the wrong direction. Lamar Jackson also hasn't, and by the way, Wentz to Luck, he is similar to Luck in a lot of ways, although it's hard for me to imagine Luck leaking to the press that he wants out if he can't start the day his teammate is starting his professional career under center. Hard for me to imagine Andrew Luck doing that kind of thing, and Wentz did. But Lamar Jackson started out not known as a passer, but if you look at his age 21 passing numbers, accuracy, he was the most accurate per Warren Sharp Analytics, most accurate starting quarterback at age 21 in the history of the NFL. That includes everyone. That includes Wentz and Luck and Peyton Manning and everybody, right? Most accurate at age 21. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to wind up the most accurate. By age 23, he wasn't the most accurate age 23 passer. But just like people will point to circumstances about Carson Wentz, look at Lamar Jackson's circumstances. Hollywood Brown is a nice receiver, like he can do some stuff. He's not a number one. They don't have dynamic, multiple, certainly not even really one, real dynamic receiving threat target for Lamar Jackson. And so the trajectory of his career that way hasn't been great. And even so, the man's won an MVP. Like, I've seen Lamar Jackson with the money on the line hit passes, like he connects. So the bottom line about Foles is about Wentz, is that it was Nick Foles who won the Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. It was Nick Foles the next year where Wentz had led a team to a 5-6 record, dead in the water, where they caught fire with Foles, made the playoffs, won a playoff game on the road, almost won 2. It was, Josh McCown, who lost to Seattle in the playoffs by the same score that Wentz lost to them in the regular season. McCown was 40 years old. He was half dead and he did that. And then it was Jalen Hurts, who clearly the offense worked better with Hurts than Wentz. I'm just looking how the team, you could say, well, Wentz didn't have this, didn't have that. That applies to the other quarterbacks on that team around that time too. They all did better than Wentz with the same stuff. Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, has won when it's mattered most, and has won an MVP, and is part of an organization that consistently fields competitive teams. I think he'll regret it.
Well, I don't think he'll regret it at all, because I think you're missing the big picture. And Jeff Saturday is more qualified than me to expound upon where I'm going. At some point in time in your career, Max, the reason I think you're wrong will kind of shock you. It's not about Carson Wentz. It's about what you think about yourself sometimes. Did it ever occur to you that T.Y. Hilton no longer looks at himself as a number one? That he's climbing up there in age? That age and attrition kicks in? T.Y. Hilton has been a big-time receiver for quite a long time. He had about 760 receiving yards last season. Okay, him and Pascal and Michael Pittman Jr., he's the new cat on the scene, a young stud that can ball and what have you. You got Jonathan Taylor running the football effectively out of the backfield as an 1,100-yard rusher. You have one of the best offensive lines in football. And so when you look at it from that perspective, rather than wanting to go somewhere where you're the number one guy, but you don't know if you stay healthy enough, you don't know if you still got it enough, et cetera, and you looking at the squad around you. Yeah, they got something. Of course, they can run the football because Lamar Jackson is out of the behind center, and he's an electrifying runner from the quarterback position. But who's your running back now? And then when you think about your wideouts, okay, you got some decent dudes. You're another decent dude, but you might not be a number one anymore. What kind of pressure is that going to put on you? That offensive line, can they protect Lamar Jackson? Can they give you a running game? And if they can, if there are question marks about that, how much more pressure is going to be applicable to you? So all of those things come into consideration when you're looking at the coach. If I'm looking at the coach, if I'm T.Y. Hilton, it's familiar surroundings. I've already played for this organization. I know who the GM is. I know who the coach is. I damn sure know what my offensive line is. I know who Pittman is. I know who Pascal is. I know who Burton is. I know who Jonathan Taylor is. And on top of all of that, I'm remembering and reminiscing about what I once saw from Carson Wentz. And when was Carson Wentz exceptional? When Frank Wright, my head coach, was his offensive coordinator and his quarterback's coach in Philadelphia.
And he had an offensive line.
So I take all of those things into consideration, and I say, okay, the safe bet for me to stretch my career a little bit longer by not putting so much on my shoulders, being a part of a team, structure and all of that. And when I'm looking for something, this is the best place for me to be. I totally get where T.Y. Hilton could be coming from, and I don't think he'll regret this at all.
I could not agree with you more, Stephen A. Listen, and for all the reasons you just said at the latter part of your argument, I think comfort where you are, right? Family not having to move, not having to reinvent yourself on a football team. You're a known commodity in Indianapolis. You know Chris Ballard, the GM. You know the owner, Jim Irsay, personally and very well. Frank Reich has been good to you throughout your career. All of those things play a large part in why you would want to stay where you are. And to Stephen A's point, the expectations of what he is or what he will be for this team is already known in Indy. So he's not going in with any false pretense about he's going to be this guy or be that guy. He just has to be a part of a very good football team. He understands they're right on the cusp. And with Carson Wentz, if he can get back to even close to where he was in Philadelphia when Frank was his coach, this thing could skyrocket. They have an ascending defense that really showed people who they were last year. They're going to have two running backs now, add on Taylor and Mack. coming back. They'll be dynamic at the offensive line position. They have good receivers on the outside, a multitude of those guys, 2 or 3. They have good tight ends in. So as you're looking at this, you're looking at all arrows pointing up, and all you have to be is a part of. You don't have to be the commanding piece. I think if he went to Baltimore, he would have been expected to be a larger piece of this offense where he understands he has to learn all this, right? You got to learn their route combinations. You got to learn their new playbook. What are you, where are you trying to be? Then you got to find the rhythm with Lamar Jackson. All of those things add on. At least in Frank's system, it's a new quarterback, but he knows where he's supposed to be. So I don't think he'll have any regrets. And I do believe if you looked at both organizations, they're both great organizations. They're both run really well. I would say they're both in the elite category of teams you would want to play for. So if it was one of those things where he was just tired in Indy or it was too chaotic, I could understand it. With all else being equal, I think he made the right choice.
Well, I appreciate your guys' comments because it makes sense in terms of continuity, in terms of familiarity. By the way, I remember in 2017, I was running around saying with Lane Johnson, the offensive, the tackle, they were trending toward elite. When he gets back, and that's exactly what happened. If he thought Lane Johnson was good, wait till he gets a load of Quentin Nelson, right? I get it that the offensive line, Jeff Saturday, has a huge say in how successful you are. Really, I was looking at this more of a Lamar Jackson to Carson Wentz comparison. If someone said you want to roll with Lamar Jackson or Carson Wentz, I would say Lamar. I think Lamar is trending in the right direction. With Carson Wentz, what we're all hoping is, all right, Carson, you're in a perfect situation. Familiar coach, offensive line, offensive weapons, a running game, a defense. He has high upside in the past, at least, right? So here we go. What I'm saying is I think Carson Wentz has regressed so severely, and it wasn't overnight. It took like a year and a half that I don't know that he gets back to even being pretty good, even on the Colts. But I'll tell you something I do know. I expect Lamar Jackson to keep getting better, and he's already pretty damn good. The man has won an MVP.
Well, you could say that, but I could also tell you to take into consideration the conferences as well. Look at the trouble Houston's having right now. We know why. No reason to revisit that at this particular moment in time involving Deshaun Watson. Look at Jacksonville. Yeah, you're about to draft Trevor Lawrence. You got Urban Meyer as your coach, but it's going to be a minute before they ascend. So really, if I'm in Indy, all I'm really worried about is the Tennessee Titans. Okay? That might be another thing. Whereas you go to the AFC North, it's the Steelers, it's the Browns, okay?
Joe Burrow's coming back?
Joe Burrow's coming back? Yeah, stay where you are.
No, yes.
Yeah, listen,
choosing the Colts is
Stephen
one thing.
A. could be talking more common sense.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, but here's the thing with Wentz. So Foxworth and I were on the show. We're on Get Up yesterday. We talked about quarterback proficiency when you're protected. I think your QBR is in the 70s when you have no pressure. When you're under pressure, it's in the 30s. That's an enormous stretch. So if the Colts can provide Wentz with any type of protection, think about the limit or the ability he could put in this. Like this thing could be a complete turnaround, almost borderline miraculous coming from Wentz, coming from Philly to where he is now. And you have a fan base that's extremely supportive, right? Think about in Philly, all the shots he was taking for all the things Max said about what Foles did and Super Bowl MVPs, a statue of him outside. He didn't have to deal with any of that stuff anymore, right? He's going to come in with a fresh slate where everybody's in full support of where he's going. I think he has a huge upside there in Indy.
No question. Listen, they're both great options. Obviously, Colts and Baltimore both have squads, but some might argue that Carson, even though he hasn't won of late, he's got a better arm than Lamar Jackson. We are talking about a receiver. We will leave it there. Jeff Saturday, happy Friday. Happy Good Friday to you, sir. We will chat with you next week. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for the time. Fellas, when we come back, we're going to discuss a little NBA. Thank you. Happy Easter. As KD finally returns from injury and James Harden is a bit hobbled, folks are starting to get concerned about the Nets' health. Who is more important to the title run? Is it KD or Harden? We debate that. And legendary coach Roy Williams calling it a career. We reflect on the Hall of Famer in Carolina Blue. Coach Seth Greenberg will join us for that. To step down.
Everybody wants to know the reason, and the reason is very simple. every time somebody asked me how long I was going to go, I would always say, as long as my health allows me to do it. But deep down inside, I knew that the only thing that would speed that up, if I did not feel that I was any longer the right man for the job. I'm not going to say the best man, because I never thought I was the best at anything. But 15 years at Kansas, I thought I was the right man. And this time at North Carolina, I thought I was the right man. I no longer feel that I am the right man for the job.
Now that's real emotion. So humble. What a class act. Look who's joining us now, my guy, Coach Seth Greenberg. Seth, great to have you with us. What's your reaction to Roy stepping down and what you just heard from him right there?
I was surprised but not shocked. But what Roy Williams was talking to, the culture of college basketball has changed. Roy Williams is about relationships. He's about helping build bridges for people to cross. He's about developing real relationships and watching guys go through the process. He's not about one and done. He's not about the transfer portal. He's not about even probably NIL. He's about coaching and the relationships that you develop when you're a coach. If you ever had a chance to listen to Marcus Page's senior night speech, you'd better understand what I'm talking about. That type of relationship is really hard to find in the culture of college basketball. And I think that's what took Roy Williams away from North Carolina. It's not the coaching, it's not the teaching, it's not the competition, it's not the grind. It's the relationship aspect of it. And when he talks about, I'm not the right man for the job now, because the job is different. It's a different job. It's not a young man's job, it's not an old man's job. But the job is different. And unless you understand what the new culture of college basketball is all about and you are all in, then you know what? It's hard to be successful. 3-point guards in 3 years. One of his two best big guys that came in as freshmen are going to be gone next year. One and dones is not what Roy Williams is about, because you don't develop those rich relationships with your players in 1 year, in 7 months. So I think he looked in the mirror and said, you know what? This is not why I got into coaching. And I'd rather step away than continue to do it this way.
Coach, so how would you sum up? Is that how you would sum up his legacy? It strikes me that within a half dozen years after Dean Smith, how do you follow Dean Smith? It wasn't immediate, but within a half dozen years, pretty close. How do you follow that and establish your own legacy? But he certainly did establish his own legacy. What is that legacy? How would you sum it up?
Well, first of all, there was Bill Guthridge, and then it was Matt Doherty, and then it was Coach Williams. But how I'd sum it up, look, you can look at the 3 national championships. You can look at the guys that made it to the NBA. You can look at the 900 wins, and all those things are great. To Roy Williams, his legacy is the relationships and the players. That's what he's going to miss the most. He's going to miss practice. He's going to miss competition. He's going to miss games. But to me, the void will be the relationships with the players. Helping someone get somewhere they can't get themselves. Building a bridge for someone to cross so they become, great husbands and great fathers and successful in society. That's why he got into it. His legacy will be those hundreds of players whose lives he touched and helped them become more prepared for the rest of their lives. Because that's why he got into coaching. Remember now, he took that North Carolina job for $4,500. He was running around all over North Carolina delivering calendars for Dean Smith. It wasn't about the money. The money found him because of the way things have changed. But the relationship thing is his legacy.
Let me say this real quick, and then we can move on, because you got you here, and I want to ask a couple of questions about the Final Four. Roy Williams is one of the great coaches that has ever coached in this game. He's phenomenal, and he's a great man as well. I love the guy personally. But I want to say this, that transfer portal you just brought up a little while ago, Coach, there's over 1,000 kids in that transfer portal.
1,100.
Over 1,000 kids. It's changing the landscape of college basketball, and it's going to compromise high school kids coming to college, because you're going to have coaches looking for dudes in that transfer portal before they even looking at the high school athletes. So we got to keep our eyes on that and see what percolates from that. And in terms of Roy Williams, you brought up Matt Doherty. You brought up Doherty, the former coach at North Carolina, right? Yep. He was horrible. And people forget about this. North Carolina had sunk. Sunk. They were in an abyss. And Roy Williams came and resurrected.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about it.
That's what's so special about it. It wasn't that he didn't inherit it from Dean Smith. They sunk, and he You revitalized them to what we knew
See,
them
that
to be.
might be his legacy.
That's the legacy.
He brought
even
North
more so
Carolina
than
back.
Kansas. But I want to go to this NCAA thing. What's the best story in the Final Four coming into this weekend? Coach, you know where I stand. Where do you stand?
Look, and that's a great story. Is it the pursuit of perfection for Gonzaga? It might be. Is it Kelvin Sampson's kind of rising from the abyss and taking over a Houston program that was absolutely, you talk about dead in the water. Absolutely no interest, apathetic, and dead in the water. No doubt. There's no doubt about it. Is it Mick Cronin, who no one thought was going to be successful, who no one thought would fit in Westwood, all of a sudden going through a number one, a number two, beating Michigan State and getting to the Final Four? Or is it Baylor, who had that long pause and everyone said, wait a second, they lost something? I'm not sure what the best story is. I think that right now we have two really interesting games, and we've got a lot of stories. But you know what, Stephen A., and listening to you before I got on the air, you're right. The most interesting story probably isn't on the men's side.
It's on the female side with Paige Beckett. I mean, this is the Steph Curry of women's basketball.
UConn Huskies.
This girl, she's special. This girl can pull up from 30.
Yeah.
She can pull up from 30.
Get familiar.
I'm watching this girl shoot the basketball. I'm like, oh, my Lord. This girl is something special.
As you were saying, basketball savant.
And a freshman that's the player of the year. Lord. That's all I wanted to say about that. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, you're right. That probably is a story of the tournament of college basketball.
That's the story. She got me glued. I'll be watching her.
Is the story of college
I'll be
basketball.
watching her.
Of course,
Yeah, you will.
Molly. We
Go
know
ahead,
that.
Max.
Hey, but let's get to our games real quickly, because everyone's talking about like the Houston Baylor game is going to be an absolute rock fight. It's going to be an absolute draw a line in the sand each and every play. The ball is going to go up in the rim, and you're going to see bodies flying all over the place. You've got two terrific backcourts. It's like looking in the mirror. But the interesting one also, can UCLA get this game against Gonzaga to a crawl? The uglier the game gets against Gonzaga, the better it is for UCLA. And UCLA figured out a way to beat Alabama in a high-scoring game, 23 points in overtime. Obviously figured out a way to beat Michigan in a slow-paced game, beat Michigan State in a fist fight. We talk about UCLA. I'm not sure we give them the respect they deserve. They've earned their way to the Final Four. Whether you like it or not, that's the great thing about the NCAA tournament. All right? You don't just arrive there. You earn your way there. Are they the teams that people thought were going to be there? No. But UCLA and Houston have earned their way, and I think we're going to have a great Final Four on the men's side.
No question. I just want to say real quick, congrats to Juwan Howard on winning AP Coach of the Year.
Incredible.
Huge.
Great job.
At his former school.
Great job.
Unbelievable
Well
story.
deserved.
No
Well
question.
deserved.
All right,
Well
Coach. We will chat with you next week. We'll have a lot to discuss. Looking forward to
Can't
it. Have
wait.
a wonderful weekend.
Same to you guys.
All right.
All right, Coach.
When we come back, guys, we go to the NBA as KD recovers from injury and James Harden. Points per game since he's been out. However, James Harden has emerged as an MVP candidate, averaging 26 points per game, 11 assists. Harden did sit out of last night's game with a hamstring injury on his own. Max, talk to me. Who will be more crucial to a Nets title run? Is it KD or Harden?
It's actually James Harden. And I want to be very clear about this. We're not saying who's better, KD or Harden. We're saying who's more crucial to this title run. The answer is James Harden. First of all, I believe that James Harden and KD together could probably win a championship without Kyrie. I'd say probably. I don't think Kyrie could win one with either just KD or just James Harden. So from that point of view, obviously, and also Kyrie is just spectacular. They're all sort of necessary, right? Here's the thing. James Harden is the guy with postseason issues in the past. He's the guy who has to get over that. He's the guy who's going to also have to figure out how to orchestrate this whole thing. Because Harden and Kyrie got together, and Kyrie was like, you're the point guard. And he was right. Kyrie's basically an off guard in a point guard's body. That's why he plays the point. He's capable of it, but he's best where he can sometimes be off ball, on ball. Harden's best orchestrating the offense. So not only is the orchestration of this offense on Harden, but actually coming through under pressure. Kyrie has done it, and KD has done it, but Harden hasn't yet. That is also on James Harden. So he is the most important player here, to say nothing of the fact that the only reason he's not MVP right now is he hasn't been in Brooklyn the entire time. But Look what happened to Houston when he left. Look what happened to Brooklyn when he got there. He's the key player.
Wrong. James Harden is not the MVP because, you got him in Brooklyn. He's the MVP right now because Kevin Durant's been hurt. If Kevin Durant were healthy, Kevin Durant would probably be there. Remember, I had Kevin Durant one on my list at the time that he went down. He's averaging 29 a game. 29 after an 18-month layoff, averaging 29 a game on 52% shooting and 43.4% from three-point range. I had him as the league MVP until he went down. Let me say this. When I think about the Brooklyn Nets, everything evolves around Kevin Durant. If James Harden was out, but Kyrie is there with KD, Brooklyn could still win it. If Kyrie was out, but James Harden was still there with KD, Brooklyn could still win it. With James Harden and Kyrie, without KD, they ain't getting out of the East. I don't know if you've been watching Philadelphia. You've been seeing Philadelphia? Dwight Howard, by the way, 18-15 last night. And you know what? He's making a contribution. Yeah. Doc Rivers doing a hell of a job in Philadelphia. Let's call it what it is. Seth Curry. It's another Curry in the building. That brother can ball. We see what Tobias Harris and what he has been doing. Balling. Listen, it's a best of 7 series. I'm not counting the Philadelphia 76ers out, particularly when Joel Embiid comes back, because I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing them do. When you look at the Nets, you're the number one offense, number one in shots from 2-point range, number 4 in shots from 3-point range. Harden, Kyrie, KD, Joe Harris, Jeff Green, can't say enough about him. And now you got LaMarcus Aldridge out there posting people up, either shooting corner threes or posting people up with his back to the basket and shooting fall-away shots, which he's capable of doing. The Brooklyn Nets are the Brooklyn Nets. But when we talk about Harden right now, even though I believe he deserves top-notch consideration for MVP, the MVP race is between him and Damian Lillard. But when I look at the Brooklyn Nets and their championship aspirations, everything comes through Kevin Durant. If Kevin Durant can't go for you, you ain't winning. It's that simple.
Well,
I
think the same thing about Harden. I think Kyrie and KD together, maybe they could win. I wouldn't bet on them. I think that Kyrie and KD together would probably come up a little bit short. Maybe not get to the finals.
But I'm saying they ain't getting to the finals without KD.
But I think that Harden and KD have comparable value. That doesn't mean Harden is as good as KD. If I have to choose one, I'll take KD. But they're both MVP level players.
Yes, I agree with
and
that.
Unlike KD, Harden is the orchestrator of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this about KD. This is why I don't think he's actually the pivotal player. The thing about KD, like when I think about him as a player, I think here's a guy who would only ever make any team in the history of basketball better if he was on it. KD is only ever additive because he's almost 7 feet. He can get his own shot from anywhere. He can hit it from anywhere. He's a versatile defender who can defend multiple positions. And also, he doesn't need the ball, in fact. You can design plays for him for sure, but you don't need to. He can get 30-plus points just in the flow of the game because, as you would say, he's that lethal offensively. So he certainly adds to it, but I don't see him as the guy the team revolves around. In fact, I believe that will be James Harden. Not as the best player, but as the orchestrator and the guy most essential to make everything flow right. And that dude is also the guy who has to prove it in the playoffs. Well, he's got to hit big shots.
Again, when we talk about James Harden, he's having maybe the best season of his career because of what he is showing he's capable of as a point guy and a floor general, orchestrating the offense or whatever. Watching basketball the way that I do come playoff time when everybody knows what you're going to do, when it's a best of 7 series, Rondo's a different animal because of what he does up here and how he lives off this. See, a guy as great as James Harden, even though he has this up here, at some point in time, you tend to fall back to your greatness as a scorer because that's what we've known him to be, particularly the last 3 years when he was averaging over 30. I'm saying to you that when you take that into account and you look at the Eastern Conference, particularly with Philadelphia and Milwaukee, you're not beating them without Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant.
You ain't beating them without Harden either.
Kevin Durant. But I'm just telling you they can. I'm saying with a KD, but without Harden, a KD and Kyrie or a KD and Harden can beat them. A Harden and Kyrie cannot beat them. You need KD. It ain't happening without KD. That's all I'm saying.
KD
and that's appreciating their greatness. Kyrie is phenomenal. Kyrie's a superstar. James Harden is a superstar. But you're not coming out of the East without KD.
I probably agree with that. I have to think more. I think that's a close call.
Well, you don't have to think. Just listen to your boy. That's all you have to do. Just listen to your boy. I'm not asking. I'm telling you.
I will remind you of something.
All right.
Without KD, Harden and Kyrie went on a West Coast trip and beat the cream of the crop.
You don't get to do that.
Why?
That would be regular season games. Are you trying to say that regular season games matter, Max Kellerman?
Let me tell you, this is why. Wait,
are you trying to say
my next
regular
point.
season matters? Because this would be a first. Because last time I checked, Molly, regular season don't mean nothing to Max Kellerman.
You have a good point, damn it, about the playoffs. This is my point about James Harden. You bring up Rondo, and this is the thing I've been saying. What makes playoff Rondo?
Right.
That's coach's time. That's the guys who know all the plays, the smart players, the guys who do their homework. Those are the guys who excel in the playoffs, right? But that's James Harden. So the fact that he has consistently choked in the playoffs tells me it's not about his brain.
I don't feel choked.
I think he.
I don't think James Harden choked.
Performed less than he normally performed.
Well, I thought the last couple of years
most.
he hasn't performed bad in the playoffs. I don't believe that.
I think he's coming around too, but it took a lot of years for him to get there. And that's my point. It's not about his brain. He has a great basketball brain. He got the yips in the playoffs. He got nervous in the playoffs, obviously. Something about the playoffs affected him negatively. He's got to get over that for them to win.
When a team has 7 games to prepare for you to win 4 games, it's significantly different than going up against them on a regular season night when you've got somebody else. And that's why I'm telling you, they would need KD. Without KD, ain't happening.
7 feet.
Ain't happening. KD's the key. You all right, Molly?
Guys, I just lost you, but Max, I'll say this to you. Anything you say can be used against you in the court of law or on First Take, and Stephen A. remembers everything. We'll leave it there, and we'll get this ear issue addressed. Coming up, KD apologizing after his controversial private DMs were... To boxing we go, fellas. Manny Pacquiao is in discussions to return to the boxing ring after an absence in nearly 2 years to fight WBO welterweight champion Terrence Crawford on June 5th. A source at Top Rank confirmed to ESPN on Tuesday. Crawford is ESPN's #1 ranked pound-for-pound boxer and was the undisputed junior welterweight champion before moving up a division. Pacquiao, 42, won the WBA welterweight title from Keith Thurman in July 2019. Stephen A., does Pacquiao have any chance to beat Terrence Crawford?
Nah. And I love me some Manny Pacquiao. Okay? This is one of the all-time greats. I don't care about the 7 losses on his career. This, as Max was telling, it reminded me during the break, this man moved up from the featherweight, for crying out loud. Flyweight, I apologize, to be the welterweight champion of the world. And Keith Thurman is a pretty damn good fighter, and Pacquiao beat him the last time they fought. July will make it 2 years since that fight. I just look at Pacquiao's age. I look at the young lion that Terrence Crawford is. We're talking about one of the top 2 fighters on the planet in Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford, understand that when you say Terrence Crawford is a champion, that don't mean anything. That don't mean anything to us. What means something to us is the fact that this brother one of the top 2 fighters on the planet. Now, I am a guy that's on the record. I think Canelo Alvarez is the best in the world right now. I think he's #1 pound for pound. I don't want to hear anything from anybody. Canelo is special. He's a monster, okay? Crawford's right there. Crawford's on another level, man. And I'm just looking at this right now, and Pacquiao, who I still haven't gotten over. I know he hasn't been even knocked down, let alone knocked out since. You know what I'm saying? Had a couple of losses, Mayweather, Joe Horn, and from Australia before Crawford beat him up. I get who Pacquiao is. I haven't completely gotten over the knockout at the hands of Juan Manuel Marquez, you understand, who was buffed up. I'll leave that to you. But in the end, man.
Special sauce in that fight. Crawford
is just special on an elite level. And I'm so mad that we still have. I'm calling out Al Heyman. I'm calling out Bob Arum. How can y'all not give us this Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford fight?
Look, I want to say something about that first.
That's the fight we need to see.
Al Heyman and the PBC are behaving, because they have most of the best welterweights, are behaving as though that's the entire welterweight universe. And why do we need anyone else? We can make great fights, which they can among themselves. But until Spence fights Crawford, stop it. Just stop it.
We have to have that fight.
Now, but putting Spence Crawford aside for a second, just dealing with Pacquiao. Pacquiao would be, in my opinion, by the time the fight started, about a 2.5 to 1 underdog.
Okay.
Between 2 to 1.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I would pick Terrence Crawford. And by the way, Canelo has the best argument for best pound for pound in the world, but I would take Crawford. I can't prove it. It's just if you say put me on a lie detector test. Who do you think is the best fighter in the world? I'd say Terrence Crawford.
Yeah, I mean.
Now, look. And he and Spence are a 50-50 fight. That's how great Spence is. But Crawford, Pacquiao, you could be the best pound for pound. You could be a 2 to 3 to 1 favorite. That doesn't necessarily mean you win the fight. I think Crawford wins the fight. I think by the end he beats Pacquiao up, knocks him out. But Pacquiao's got chances. Because, as you said, last time he was in the ring, it was against the undefeated welterweight titleist Keith Thurman. Now, Keith Thurman may not be Terrence Crawford, but he is a damn good fighter. Pacquiao went to war with Keith Thurman.
Dropped him in the first round.
Dropped first round. And won a decision he deserved, right? When he lost to Jeff Horn, he probably should have won that decision.
He should have won that decision. Right? He should have won that decision.
Okay.
Joe Horn didn't deserve that.
I'm reminded, Crawford switch hits. He'd go orthodox or southpaw, right?
Yeah.
Right-handed or southpaw.
Yeah.
You know who else did that, who passed away recently? Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Of course. Yeah.
Middleweight champ of our childhood, right? Hagler fought.
Marvelous one.
Hagler fought Roberto Durant, right? And it was his first big fight. Hagler, against a big money name guy. And Durant was a lightweight moving up. And he was past his prime. He'd already lost some fights. Durant went Hagler 15 rounds. It was close. Hagler won, but he squeaked by.
Yeah, but
man, when you have a great fighter, he ain't different than Marvin Hagler. When you have a great fighter like Manny Pacquiao, even if he's older, especially if he's coming off a big win, even if it's over a year ago, he can still summon that greatness for one last performance.
Okay. You're gonna get at me about this, but I'm gonna let you. When I'm on General Hospital,
Rick.
By the way, I'll be back on later this month. Last week in April, I'll be on General Hospital for 3 days, actually. Here's the deal. When I'm there, the star of the show is Maurice Bernard, who plays Sonny Corinthos. He is a huge Keith Thurman fan because he knows his boxing. And he's a huge Keith Thurman fan. I have never been, I have to confess. I respect him.
Yeah.
I think Keith Thurman is really good. But I never looked at Keith Thurman and looked at him the way I look at Crawford.
Agreed.
The way that I look at Spence. The way that I look at Canelo. The way that I look
excellent.
at Triple J.
He ain't pound for pound.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I never looked at him that way.
Okay.
That's what I mean, okay? So Pacquiao beating him, even though I knew Pacquiao could lose that fight, it's to be respected, but it ain't the same.
Time out.
It ain't the same.
Time out. I agree with
Go
you.
ahead. Okay.
Crawford
Okay.
never beat a welterweight as good as Keith Thurman.
I understand that, but Paul, he's mauled everybody that's been in his past.
Look, and here's
everybody that's been
you brought that up.
37-0 with 28 KOs.
I'm glad you brought that
Okay.
up. When Crawford was a lightweight, he was a boxer puncher.
That's right.
Now that he's a welterweight, he's a
puncher boxer. Yes, he is.
He will take
Because he
more
wants to
risks.
show.
And he's punching he's sitting down on his punches. But if you're a puncher boxer now and you're fighting Manny Pacquiao, that also gives Pacquiao more chances.
Yeah, but I don't think Crawford would do that with him because he knows that Pacquiao's a one-dimensional fighter. He's coming. He's elite, phenomenal, Hall of Famer, but he's coming. And so if you Terrence Crawford, you can turn back into the boxer puncher. You don't have to be the puncher boxer because that ain't what it's going to require, Matt.
Maybe not until late in the fight, and then you turn into a puncher boxer and knock him out.
Okay.
Look, I think you and I probably see this fight similarly in terms of who wins and the result and around when and all that stuff.
Okay.
The difference is you're saying Pacquiao don't have a chance
Against him.
Pacquiao has a chance against any welterweight. Even Floyd said that was a tough fight.
Okay, whatever. The point is that when you look at Pacquiao's great. I know this. He's aged. We get that. I'm saying this because of Crawford, not because I see Pacquiao. I'm just saying Crawford is he's at another level, man.
Yep. By the way, let it go the distance, and a popular fighter like Pacquiao does just enough. Okay. And maybe the decision could go the other way. I'm just saying there's chances.
I love Pacquiao, and I'm scared he's going to get knocked out.
Yeah.
Can I say it like that?
For sure.
I'm scared he's going to get knocked out. That's what I don't want to see him get knocked out again.
I think Crawford by knockout.
I don't want Mitt Romney ringside with his mouth open.
Crawford by knockout is a good pick. I'm just saying Pacquiao didn't like go away and come back 10 years later, and now he's on the senior circuit. He's still getting in there with the best welterweights in the world.
I don't like him against Crawford. Not against Crawford. Not
I like
against
the fight.
that guy.
Do you like the fight? You want to watch the fight?
Of course I'll watch the fight. KO streak. He's been knocking people out since 2016 when you joined First Take. All right, let's leave it there, guys. To the NBA, Kevin Durant. Let's discuss it. Apologizing after his controversial private DMs were made public. The fellas react to what the league should do now. If the Clippers want the chip, who needs to step up? Kawhi, Paul George. We're talking LA hoops after the break. Yesterday, Kevin Durant addressed the messages released by actor Michael Rapaport that had been made public this week. Rapaport posted private messages that he said Durant had sent him, which included threatening language, anti-gay, had sent misogynistic slurs. Coach Steve Nash had... Oh, I guess we got the sound right now. Go ahead with the sound.
I'm sorry that people seen that language I use. That's not really what I want people to see and hear from me. But hopefully I can move past it and get back out on the floor.
Okay, what I was saying before we got the sound was that Coach Steve Nash did address this with him, with the team, et cetera, and obviously that was KD addressing the situation for the first time. Stephen A., how do you think the NBA should handle this?
I think they should fine him and move on. It's unfortunate that Michael Rapaport would reveal those text messages. He should not have done that. That private DM from Kevin Durant. He should not have done that. That was the wrong thing to do. And in the interest of full disclosures, Max Kellerman, Molly, I've had private conversations and back and forths with numerous players. Two of them have been Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the past. You've never heard me utter it, and I wouldn't without their permission. I wouldn't do that. It's a private matter, and that's not what you do. And so that's a code that Michael Rapaport violated, and I think it's important to say that. Having said all of that, I also think that Kevin Durant was going directly at Michael Rapaport. You can't use that language. You shouldn't use that language, and the league needs to send a message by simply fining him to make that point. But let's not make it more than it is. Even though you're going to have folks in the gay community that will look at it as anti-gay and stuff like that and personalizing it. No, Kevin Durant was going at Michael Rapaport because obviously they've communicated in the past. And, he felt like Michael Rapaport shouldn't have been saying some things. And so they were going at, it was a personal argument between themselves. To try to generalize this like Kevin Durant was being anti-gay or anything like that, I think is going a step too far because I do not believe for 1 second that was his intent. And I don't think that he should be bothered with all of that. But that doesn't mean the commissioner is going to feel that way. And it doesn't mean the commissioner is going to feel that way based on the evidence that security brings to Byron Spruill, who runs operations for the NBA. And when he commiserates with Commissioner Adam Silver, who knows what conclusion they will come to. And I'm going to reiterate this point because I know it's going to go up because I know this is going to come up because I know this league. When Donald Sterling was exiled from the NBA, banned from the NBA by Adam Silver, that was based off of a private conversation that he was having with his mistress that she secretly taped. And Adam Silver said, quote, well, it's public now. It's public now. So because no matter how private the conversation may have been, why do you have to be around black people? What is that about? What do you get out of being around black people? No, Kevin Durant was talking to Michael Rapaport. He wasn't talking about anybody else, any group of people or anybody else. He was talking directly to Michael Rapaport. So I do think they're two completely different situations. But make no mistake about it, there's going to be other owners and league executives that say, well, you did this to Donald Sterling for this reason. What you gonna do to this guy? Why are you not gonna do anything? Is it because he's a player? That's what I'm fearful of, but I hope that the NBA commissioner and the league office would think better than taking this further than a fine because it's a personal argument and I think they should leave it at that and I don't think any more of it should be made, any more noise should be made about it. That's my personal opinion. Leave Kevin Durant alone after the fine.
Yeah, he has to be punished. I agree, it's probably a fine for two reasons. One, it's for the anti-gay remarks, even though he didn't intend, it doesn't seem to me, to mean it as anti-gay. He meant it more generally as an insult. The way he was using the language seemed to me to say, you're kissing someone's butt, right? You're kissing up to them. But he used language that was anti-gay. And the problem is not just when he says, I wish people wouldn't have heard me use that, or know that I used that language or heard the language that I used. It's that when you do that, implicit in that remark is there's something wrong with that. So a lot of people who are gay and just people who empathize with other people say, well, wait a minute, that feels bad for other people to hear. But that's why I think KD is saying I don't want anyone else to hear it. Whatever I'm directing in my private life, I did not mean for that to be public. And we all know that we have different behavior and even sometimes language in private than in public. We don't curse generally in public as much as we would do in private, or use bad language, that kind of stuff. But the other thing is that he made a threat. You can't threaten somebody, and especially put it in writing. Now, I understand why KD wouldn't expect to be exposed that way, because he's like, wait a minute, that's a DM. That's between me and you.
Yeah.
And now you're going to put me out on Front Street. Apparently, KD and Michael Rapaport have a relationship off Front Street.
They do.
Right?
Or they did.
Or they did, right. And that's why maybe KD got mad in the first place. Like, if you hang out with somebody, if you know someone a little bit, and then they're publicly criticizing you, you're like, wait, time out. Why are you publicly getting on social media and saying stuff about me if we're hanging out in private, right? Like, well, I figured that was, like, we're past that kind of thing, or you wouldn't do that. The other thing I want to say about KD, so I do think he should be punished, I think it's a fine, is, in a way, he seems thin-skinned, right? Like, stuff really bothers him. He's had burner accounts. He gets into it with fans on social media, or has in the past. And you're like, KD, what's that about? What is it, some kind of insecurity? But there's another way to look at that from KD, and that's he does care what people think because he respects other people. In a way, you would think, well, how does that make any sense? Well, why are you getting into it with a fan, KD? That's just some anonymous fan.
What I will say that a lot of people feels like he's not respecting them, like he's so thin-skinned at times that he comes across as a bit truculent, a bit acerbic, and
what I'm saying is, yes,
that's what they say about him.
And what I'm
now.
saying is,
he
what I'm
needs
saying
to know
is, there's a way to
saying about him now.
What I'm saying is, there's a way to see it in the opposite way. Like, KD, why are you getting into it with a fan, some anonymous fan on social media? Boy, you're really sensitive. Another way to look at it is, actually, just because that's an anonymous fan, he doesn't think of them as any less of a person than if some famous person, like Michael Rapaport or someone else, says something. He treats people like people, even a fan on social media. It matters to him, and he expects to be treated the same way.
I love the fact, Max, that he speaks his mind. You know, I've always respected the hell out of KD from the standpoint that he's real and true to himself in terms of his feelings, and he doesn't mind expressing himself. Yep. There's a couple of times that we've gotten the back and forth, and I had to stand down and go like this. He got me there. He's right about that. I was wrong about that. You know, when we've just communicated privately amongst ourselves. He's made some very, very valid points. He's a highly intelligent brother. He expresses himself, and I have no problem with it. The problem is, though, you know, he sometimes acts like you don't have a right to assume based on the evidence that you're confronted with. It's like if you're not getting something out of thin air, like, for example, you might call him thin-skinned, right? You just did, okay? He'd be offended by that, at least if the past has been indicative of that. He'd be offended by something like that. When you're saying there's a mountain of evidence.
If you get offended by being called thin-skinned, it proves the point.
But there's a mountain of evidence that shows that you have reasons for saying what you said, and he might want you to shove all of that aside because he firmly believes otherwise. That's the kind of stuff that he encounters himself with. And when they call LeBron James the king, one of the reasons they call LeBron James the king is because he's a champion 4 times over. Another reason they call LeBron James the king is because he handles himself and his business in such an adult and man-like fashion that it does make other people look a little bit bad at times.
I get that point, too. One thing that strikes me about KD is he's been caught with burner accounts, right? And what that tells me is KD is living in a world where he has certain things he wants to say, but he's not allowed. That's why you have a burner account, right? And here again, he's caught saying things like, this is how I talk in private, or to someone I know who I'm mad at. The person that KD is seems to be someone who's chafing against the fact that he's not really allowed to be himself in public.
Before we move on, let me say this. Years ago, Charles Barkley showed up at a press conference with all of us NBA reporters because he was joking around about something, and I forget what it was, and it was deemed inappropriate, and they made national news over it or whatever. Charles Barkley walked into a press conference for the NBA and cussed out everybody. Everybody. And said, now, what the hell is your question?
Right.
And everybody was silent because they took it out of context and they tried to castigate him for no good reason. So what I'm saying is the level of bravery that Barkley has, particularly if you're in Kevin Durant's position, you say he can't say something. No, Max, it's that you choose to want to say something but not absorb the shrapnel that comes with it. Charles Barkley is somebody that doesn't care and strong enough not to care. I might be another one of those people. Several other people might be another one of those people. If you're an athlete, it's not that you can't. It's that you might not be brave enough to deal with the fallout from it.
Not everyone can be Charles Barkley.
He's not going to lose his job.
I don't think we could. I don't think we could have a world where everyone was Charles Barkley.
I understand
it takes all kinds. In Charles Barkley, Kevin Durant, KD here. If he reacts the way he did, proves the charge that he is being thin-skinned.
But if you're not worried about losing your job, and you know you're going to still get your money, what you worried about? You say what you mean. You mean what you say and you move on.
At the end of the day, guys, the older I get, the less people I want to deal with. I don't know how people have the same phone number since high school. If I could, I'd change my phone number every 6 months. Life is hard enough. You only want people in your life that actually add to it and to deal with all that nonsense. And at this point, it's like, who cares what people think? People are going to talk about you regardless of what you do. People are going to judge you as perfect as you try to be.
Hey, Molly, you brought up the other day.
Molly, it's just like, I used to live like that, trying to be a people pleaser and worry
That's where
about
I'm
what
going.
everybody thinks. It's like
that's where I'm going.
Who gives a damn?
Remember what you
now
brought
I'm
up the other day?
You
remember what you brought up the other day when you said you started working here and you received some advice from Skip Bayless, but then you forgot to mention the part when you came to me. And you said to me, how do you deal with it one time? And I said to you, Molly, only thing I ask is, did they spell my name right? It's with a PH, not a V. Other than them, they could kick rocks. I could give a damn what they say.
Well, we saw
That's
this.
what I told you.
We saw this
back in 2015, and I still mean it that way today.
We saw this, and I wasn't on the show when you responded to Russell Westbrook, right? I wasn't, but we saw it then too. And Westbrook's point was, you're not just going to control the narrative. All we're doing, or all people are going to have their thoughts. They're entitled to their own thoughts, and if they make them public. So long as they, as long as they have the ability to do so, and now with social media, everyone does, they can do that too. And Westbrook, Durant, and no one else can control in a free country what people think and say about them.
Well, I say bump the narrative. We all make mistakes. We're all imperfect, and just try your best. That's all I got to say about it. By the way, we did ask everybody at home what they think in terms of if KD should be punished, and 62% said no. So the majority are saying no, he should not. We'll see what happens. We'll keep you all up to speed on what happens. Guys, more NBA to dive into. Let's go to the Nuggets. Last night, defeating the Core last night in a game in which the Nuggets led the entire way. Paul George contributed 17 points, 8 rebounds after missing the previous 2 games with a sore right foot. Max, do you think Paul George is going to be under more pressure than anybody in these Western Conference playoffs?
I do think so, because, look, you can blame Kawhi all you want for playing GM. And Kawhi had a bad Game 7 against Denver. But otherwise, Kawhi has been an all-time great throughout his whole career, an all-time great playoff performer. Just look at what he does in the playoffs. He's been unbelievable in the clutch. Even Mariano Rivera blew some World Series, right? It happens even to the best closers of all time. But that's what Kawhi has been, like an all-time great clutch player. Now, are Kawhi and Paul George's talent and skills pitched quite as high, and physical gifts pitched quite as high as LeBron and AD? No, not quite. But they should be good enough, given the right supporting cast, to get it done. And they seem to have the right supporting cast now with the Clippers. They bring in Rondo. They go, by the way, we were talking about Terrence Mann. That kid can play.
He can play. I like Terrence Mann. I like him a lot.
They still have Patrick Beverly and Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris and Zubac and, Ibaka and Batum. They have a supporting cast. And Kawhi is going to play the way he's going to play in the playoffs, which is, a 30-point-plus guy and a great player, an MVP-level player. It comes down to what Paul George does. If Paul George can elevate or even just stay Paul George in the playoffs, they have a chance to win the whole thing. The problem with Paul George, as it is the problem with James Harden, although Harden is falling from higher heights than Paul George, is he has been unable consistently just to stay Paul George when it matters most. Therefore, the Clippers, who are ready to win a chip, it looks like to me on paper, the Lakers are hurting, the Nets are hurting, and even if they weren't, the Clippers are right there, are depending on the guy Kawhi made them give all that stuff up for to come through when it matters most. That's Paul George.
I think you're wrong on this. I truly, truly do. But before I get into that, let me say that the Denver Nuggets are real. Michael Porter is special. And right now, we have universally walked around acknowledging Jerry West as one of the greatest, if not the greatest executive in the history of sports, in the history of basketball. I would remind everybody that Jerry West was a consultant and a right-hand man to Ballmer and Lawrence Frank, Doc Rivers, and those boys in L.A. They had the 12th and the 13th pick. It was either 12th or the 13th or the 13th or 14th, I remember. It was one of the, but they had back-to-back picks in the first round. And they passed up on Michael Porter Jr.
Because of his back?
That's right. Hey, I understand. That's a reasonable reason to back off from somebody. But damn it was a mistake. As we look at Michael Porter, ladies and gentlemen, let me put y'all on notice. This man is a young, rising star in basketball. And if he can stay healthy, the Denver Nuggets will win a championship within the next 2 to 3 years.
Could be this year.
It could be this year, but they will win a championship because Jamal Murray is that dude and the Joker is the Joker.
You watched the game last night.
Yes, I did.
Did you see the two-man game that Jokic and Aaron Gordon had going?
Listen.
When Aaron Gordon cut to the basket?
I understand that, and that's a big deal, particularly when you got bigs like Drummond and Anthony Davis with LeBron in the West to deal with. Aaron Gordon is definitely a plus. It's not an accident they're undefeated with since he arrived at 4-0. But let me tell you why I'm going with Kawhi Leonard as the guy with the pressure. I get what you're talking about in terms of Paul George's game. But when Paul George, and I love Paul George and I believe in him and I believe he's going to get it done. But if for some reason he doesn't, we ain't going to let Kawhi Leonard off the hook. Because when you ask the Clippers to mortgage the farm and give up multiple first, second round picks and all the stuff that they gave up to get Paul George because Kawhi Leonard demanded that they do so. When you do all of that, you don't get to run and hide and point the finger at somebody else because they didn't get it done when that was your guy. Okay? It's almost like management. If management swears to upper management, this is the guy, and then that guy flames out, well, then that's on you. Who insisted to management, you got to get him. Now we got to take it a step further because it gets even more important here. You know what Kawhi Leonard was saying in the offseason when they lost to the Denver Nuggets after being up 3-1? Max, we need a point guard. We need a point guard. We got to get a point guard. We don't have a point guard. Patrick Beverly can play, but he's basically a defensive player. But we need a point guard. We need a quintessential floor general, somebody that can run the show, somebody that can run the offense. So every shot we get ain't a difficult contested shot.
He's right.
Blah, 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 blah. He was right. Now you got Rondo.
Who hasn't played for them yet, by the way.
Who hasn't played for them yet. Now you got Rondo. Playoff Rondo. That's what you got him for. So, okay, you needed Paul George. You got him. You need a point guard? You got him. This is your franchise. You want to be the dude with the crown dangling from the mirror of your convertible, arriving in L.A. as a champion and an NBA Finals MVP, saying this is your town now? You didn't say it, but your New Balance commercial said it for you. Where you at? The point is, again, you average at 25.9. Kawhi Leonard's a superstar. I know that. There's no debating here. Just like I wasn't debating that about Russell Westbrook yet the other day. Nobody's debating the greatness of the individual talent that Kawhi Leonard is. That is done. Period. The question is, what you come to L.A. for? What you come to the Clippers for? We asked because now's the time. And just like last year, you won 3-1 with LeBron waiting for you. You didn't make it there. got to remember, Kawhi Leonard has the license to opt out and be a free agent this summer. He don't have to stay with the Clippers. What you there for? You here to deliver something they never have. The Clippers have never even been to a conference final. Ever. Could you imagine if Kawhi Leonard doesn't even get them to a conference finals? Oh, no. I'm not looking at Paul George. I'm looking at him.
Fair point. I'll say this. If he chokes in a Game 7 again, I think you'd be right. I don't anticipate that because he's never done it before.
I don't either.
He's always been, again, look at Kawhi's playoff record. He's one of the greatest players who ever lived in the playoffs. Yeah. He's better than normally in the regular season. That's a great player.
Saying, no, I disagree with you there. I'm not saying numbers-wise. What I'm saying is you weren't asked to do anything in the regular season when you were with the Spurs compared to what they asked you to do in the playoffs.
Okay,
they
but then in Toronto.
I'm just saying, but they asked for more. In Toronto, yeah, I mean, but you would consider, but you remember, he took about 22 games off. It was the load management thing. He wasn't asked to do that.
He was there for the playoffs.
He was there for the playoffs.
In the playoffs, he's been one of the greatest players ever in the playoffs. Okay. But he did choke in Game 7.
Remember those conditions.
So if he does that again, I'm with you. All right, that's on you, Kawhi. The pressure would be. But I'm saying this. Basically, he's not the GM LeBron is. LeBron looked at Miami and said, I'm going to take Wade and Bosh, put himself in a winning situation. Kyrie and Kevin Love, putting himself in a winning situation. All right, I'm only going to be able to have one dude with me in LA. Who's that going to be? AD. Winning situation. AD's an MVP caliber player. Kawhi's only got to make a choice one time. That was to go to the Clippers and say, hey, bring me Paul George. Paul George then has to be a second banana who can play at almost an MVP level. He hasn't done it in the playoffs. Now, the reason he's with the Clippers and not the Lakers, Stephen A., is because LeBron tried to get him in LA. Hey, come join me and AD. That's non-competitive. The league is not competitive.
And I respect you for that.
Kawhi's like, no, I'm going to compete against you.
I respect
the best available dude was Paul George.
Yeah, but that's you. Why don't you get the hell over it, Max? Why don't you stop hiding behind all of this stuff? Max, why don't you give him a Christmas card? Buy him a Christmas present. Invite him over to dinner. You want to celebrate
Paul
that?
George got to step up.
No. What I'm saying to you is that, yeah, that's what he did.
Yeah.
I respect that. He did it. But in the end, it's about what you're going to do. You came to L.A. for a reason. You had them sacrifice the farm for a reason. You wanted Paul George. You wanted your point guard. They've given you everything you wanted. And we know he was asking for some other stuff, the private jets and everything else. We probably know he got that too.
Get it,
I'm not mad at him.
Get
it all. But in the end, you got to show up. And if Kawhi Leonard, listen, if the Los Angeles Clippers don't make it to the conference final.
Let me ask you something.
The number one person you must look at is Kawhi Leonard.
Let me ask you something. If they don't make it to the conference finals,
right?
And who do you predict it will be who has underperformed? Kawhi, Rondo, or Paul George?
I would tell you it would be Paul George based on history. Right. Based on history. Because Rondo shows up in the playoffs, and Kawhi has too, except Game 7 last year. But what I'm saying to you is, again, similar to what I was talking about with Westbrook, I know what you can do. I know your numbers. That's a given. The point is, you got to finish the job. And if you're Kawhi Leonard and you know, Ballmer did all of this because you're trying to build a new arena where the former LA
Kawhi said, get me Paul George or I'm not coming.
Where the LA Forum used to be, you're trying to build a new arena there. You're trying to establish yourself in LA. This is what you're trying to do. It's a big deal. That's why he did all of this.
So let me get this straight.
You got to at least get us to the conference finals.
By that logic, though, like if LeBron, who chose Kyrie, right? Like he comes back to Cleveland because he sees Kyrie, goes, I can win with this cat, right? And then brings in Kevin Love also. If LeBron